September 20th, 1988. Small town in central New Mexico called Belen. The morning air carries the dry coolness of late summer, the kind that promises a hot afternoon out in the desert. At 9:30 a.m., a 19-year-old college sophomore named Tara Lee Calico wheels her mother's pink 10-speed Huffy out of the garage of the family home on Broad Street. She slides on her headphones, presses play on a Boston cassette in her yellow Sony Walkman, and rolls north onto New Mexico State Road 47. She has ridden this same route almost every morning for the past year. 34 miles, 2 hours, a long flat stretch of highway running out toward the open horizon. Before she leaves, she calls back to her mother, Patty. "Mom, if I'm not back by 12, come look for me." Patty Doyle will come looking. Patty Doyle will spend the next 18 years of her life looking, because Tara Calico will never be found. Tara was a sophomore at the University of New Mexico, Valencia branch, with a high grade point average and plans to become a psychiatrist. She had a job at the First National Bank of Belen and a steady boyfriend. That afternoon, she had plans to play tennis at 12:30, then a class at 4. The bike rides were her time alone, a long meditation between the desert and asphalt, with the Walkman playing through her headphones. But there's one detail her mother had been worried about for weeks before that morning. Patty used to ride with her, but she had stopped. She told police later that on a previous ride, she had felt herself being followed, stalked, was the word she used, by a motorist on that same stretch of Highway 47. She had warned Tara about it. She had told her daughter to start carrying a can of mace, and Tara had refused. She didn't want the weight on her bike. That morning, Tara was wearing a white t-shirt with First National Bank of Belen written across the front, white shorts with green stripes, white ankle socks, turquoise and white Avia sneakers, a gold butterfly ring with a tiny diamond, an amethyst ring, and small gold hoop earrings. Her plan was Highway 47 north to where it meets Highway 60, then turn around and ride back. Several drivers saw her that morning. She was steady in the shoulder, in no apparent distress. But what those drivers also saw, behind her, very close, slowing when she slowed, was a dirty white or light gray 1950s Ford pickup truck with a handmade white camper shell mounted on the back. It was following her. It had New Mexico plates. The last confirmed sighting of Tara Calico is at approximately 11:30 a.m., about 2 miles from her own front door on her way back home. After that, nothing. When noon came and Tara wasn't home, Patty got in her car and drove out along the route. She drove the whole loop and didn't see her daughter. And she didn't see the bike. And then she drove it again. Still nothing. She called the police later that afternoon. The next day, a full-scale search began and the highway started giving up small pieces of the morning. Patty herself, walking the shoulder, found her daughter's Sony Walkman about 100 yards off the road. Around it, in the dirt, were footprints, what looked like the marks of a brief scuffle, bicycle tracks that may have been Tara's, vehicle tire tracks, and a small slick of fresh oil. A Boston cassette tape was found 3 miles from home on the opposite side of the highway, as if dropped riding away from the house. Patty believed her daughter had been throwing things from a vehicle to mark a trail. Other pieces of the Walkman were recovered 19 miles east, far off her usual route. The bike, the bright pink 10-speed, was never found. Tara was never found. The investigation went into a slow, agonizing grind. Reports came in from across the southern United States. A young woman matching Tara's description seen here, seen there, but none of them led anywhere. And then, 9 months after she vanished on June 15, 1989, the case made an unexpected jump from the New Mexico desert to a beach town in the Florida Panhandle. A woman in Port St. Joe, Florida, 1,200 miles from Belen, pulled into the parking lot of a Junior Food Store convenience store. She parked and noted that next to her was a white Toyota cargo van with no windows, driven by a mustached man in his 30s. She went into the store, and when she came back out, the van was gone, and lying face down on the asphalt where it had been parked was a Polaroid photograph. She picked it up and turned it over, and what she saw was a young woman and a young boy, both lying on what appeared to be sheets and a blue-striped pillow, both with their hands tied behind their backs, both with their mouths covered with black duct tape. The young woman had long dark hair and what looked like a scar on her leg. Beside them in the photograph was a paperback novel. The novel was My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Andrews. V.C. Andrews was Tara Calico's favorite author. The book was one she was known to be reading at the time of her disappearance. The film type used in the Polaroid was a kind that Polaroid Corporation didn't even start manufacturing until May of 1989. So whatever this photograph showed, it had been taken sometime in the previous month. The interior was identified as the back of a white Toyota cargo van with no windows, exactly matching the vehicle the witness had seen pulling away. The Polaroid was broadcast on the television show A Current Affair in July. Patty Doyle was contacted by family friends almost immediately. She and her husband John drove to look at the photograph. Patty looked at the woman's leg, at a scar that ran across the calf, a scar identical to one her daughter had received in a car accident years before. Patty Doyle said of the photograph the words, "I am convinced that is my daughter." But here's where the case becomes a hall of mirrors. The photograph was sent for forensic analysis to 3 different agencies. Scotland Yard analyzed it and concluded that the woman in the picture was, in their opinion, Tara Calico. The FBI analyzed it and concluded the opposite, that they did not believe it was her. Los Alamos National Laboratory analyzed it, and a forensic scientist there said in print that the woman was definitely not Tara. So 3 of the most respected forensic institutions on Earth, looking at the same photograph, came to 3 different answers. There was also the boy. The parents of a 9-year-old named Michael Hanley, who had vanished on a hunting trip in the Zuni Mountains of New Mexico in April of 1988, recognized their son. And for a moment it seemed 2 missing children had collided on one piece of evidence. Then, in 1990, Michael Hanley's remains were found in the Zuni Mountains, only a few miles from where he had wandered away. He had died of exposure. He had never been kidnapped at all. The boy in the Polaroid was someone else, and to this day, no one knows who. The Polaroid is still the most recognizable image associated with Tara's case, but the story didn't stop there. Other photographs surfaced over the years. One showed a woman with bandages over her face, sitting on an Amtrak train next to a man. That one is now generally considered a prank. In 2009, the police chief on Port St. Joe received 2 anonymous letters, postmarked Albuquerque, containing a photograph of a young boy with a black ink line drawn over his mouth, mimicking duct tape. A 3rd letter went to the local Port St. Joe newspaper. There was no return address, no note, no explanation, just the boy with the ink mark on his face. So whoever sent them has never been identified. Back in New Mexico, time was passing. In 1993, Patty received a call from a woman who said she had heard the sound of digging late at night, the day after Tara vanished, at a property about 7 miles south of Belen. Authorities took backhoes out to the site and dug, but they found nothing. In 1998, 10 years after she disappeared, Tara Calico was officially declared dead. A judge ruled the cause of death a homicide. Her father had died 2 years earlier. Her mother Patty would die in 2006, never having held her daughter's body, never having heard a name from law enforcement. But then, in 2008, the sheriff of Valencia County, a man named Rene Rivera, sat down for a news interview and said something that detonated through the case. He said he knew what had happened to Tara Calico. He said 2 local teenage boys, both of whom had known Tara, had been driving a truck behind her that morning. Something had happened. An accident, an act of harassment. He wasn't fully clear, and the boys had hit her. Panicking, knowing they would be in serious trouble, they had killed her. Then, with the help of family members, they had covered up the crime. The sheriff said he knew the names of the boys, now grown men. He said he knew the names of the parents who had helped. But he said that without Tara's body, he could not bring a prosecution. Tara's stepfather, John Doyle, was furious. "If you have circumstantial evidence strong enough to convict," he said, "then you do not sit on it." But the sheriff sat on it. In 2013, a 6-person task force was created, and a year later it was disbanded. And then slowly, the case somehow moved again. In 2020, an analysis of decades of evidence by a nonprofit called the Rocky Mountain Information Network recommended that Valencia County investigators re-interview a person who, decades earlier, had professed to know nothing. That recommendation was the only one heavily redacted before the report was made public. And it is the strongest signal that the person, in fact, knows everything. Investigators traveled out of the state to do that interview. The lead detective, Lieutenant Joseph Rowland, would later describe it as unraveling a thread. In April of 2021, a sealed search warrant was executed at private residence in Valencia County. The contents of that warrant remain sealed. In June of 2023, the sheriff of Valencia County stood at a press conference and announced that they had identified the offenders and that there was sufficient evidence to send the case to the district attorney for review of potential charges. The latest theory, after 35 years of work, is that Tara Calico was not abducted by a stranger. She was abducted by a group of people her own age, locals who knew exactly who she was, who were waiting in 2 cars at a spot along her route home. A confrontation occurred, and in the words of Lieutenant Rowland, the result of which Tara Calico did not survive. The man in the old Ford pickup that everyone fixated on for 30 years may have just been creeps. The real killers in this theory were already parked, waiting off the side of the road. But here is the cold thing. By the time the case got to the district attorney's office, the statute of limitations had run out on every charge except first-degree murder and certain sex offenses. To prove first-degree murder requires evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. To find Tara Calico's body would help enormously, but that body has never been found. In September of 2025, an Albuquerque newspaper ran a story. Lieutenant Rowland had stopped at an abandoned copper mine north of Belen on his way home from a sheriff's conference. He had gone in to retrieve a set of $12 fly traps he had set inside the shaft. The traps are designed to catch insects that feed on human remains. He is hoping the bugs will tell him something the people will not. A pivotal eyewitness, a woman who reported seeing 4 or 5 young men and a young woman parked across the highway from where Tara was riding, has died. So have suspects. So have Tara's parents. So has the sheriff who, in 2008, said he knew the names but could not prove the case. The thing that has not died is the silence. For 37 years, that 2-mile stretch of road on Highway 47 has held a kind of vacuum where a young woman should still be. She was 2 miles from home on a route she had ridden hundreds of times before in broad daylight on a road full of cars. In the time it takes most of us to make a sandwich, she became smoke. The Polaroid in the Florida parking lot, 3 of the world's best forensic agencies cannot agree if it is her or not. The men that investigators believe killed her in the latest theory are walking around their own town today, knowing. And somewhere in a field or in a dry wash or down the throat of an all-copper mine, there is a body that the desert has been keeping quiet for 37 years. The fly traps wait in the dark. The road waits. The mother, who once said, "Come look for me if I'm not back," came looking. And she looked for the rest of her life, but she did not find her. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the crime coroner. Much love and bliss.